And then how do you get ISO certified? This is like, I think this chart might look a little bit complicated, but if you really see, there is mainly these three different phases. There is this pre-certification phase where we kind of determine if you are ready for your certification or not, right? So we have certain mandatory document requirements which we will review with you, and your implementation partner like Gert's team and stuff, and then like determine whether you are ready for certification. If you think we are ready, if you think we are ready, then we will go ahead and prepare the proposal and have the contract and everything signed. Then like we will come up with our audit program and whatnots, and then share that with you. So primarily the two things that you need to know is there is two phases of this audit. One is stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 essentially, it is also called like kind of document review. So we look at all your policies, procedures, and make sure that, you know, whatever you referred in the statement of applicability is all covered, you know, as part of your, you know, the documentation submission and record submission and whatnot. That usually takes, depending on, usually we are required to do this stage 1 and stage 2 certification. The general allocation of time is also provided very specifically in one of the manuals in ISO, which is ISO 27006. So they very clearly document in terms of how many days we need to be taking to audit an entity based on what all the criteria and things. So essentially, you know, it is based on the number of users using the ISMS system and whatnot. But just to give you an idea, stage 1 usually is about you know, anywhere from 1 to 3 days for a medium-sized company, but for a larger company it could change drastically. And stage 2 audit, most of the time it is on-site audit, and IAS has kind of relaxed the requirement of on-site audit due to COVID restrictions, but like starting January 1st, we are required to do on-site audit only, unless we get any specific exemption from our or exemption request from our customer, which we will, you know, run it by IAS before, you know, approving that, right? And then like once the stage 2 audit, technically it can go on from like say minimum of 4 or 5 days all the way to maybe even a few weeks. And that's where like we will go over each one of your controls. We'll have your subject matter expert walk us through, and we will document a lot of those findings, observations and things, and then provide you with you know, the specific non-conformities that we see as part of our audit, right? And then like you do have a few weeks to fix all the non-conformities that are identified. Some of them could be as simple as updating your policy document, which has not been updated with your new process, or it could be, you know, implementing even a new technology solution and whatnot. So it all depends on what is that we identify as part of our stage 2 audit. And then like at the end of the audit, then the audit report is provided to our certification committee. And the certification committee is the one that kind of determines whether we could approve the certificate or whatnot. And then we go through the site, and then we grant the initial certification, right? And then after year 1, that is also referred in our certificate, unless you maintain the surveillance audits, your certificate is not valid. So year 1, we come back again and then do the surveillance audit. Surveillance audit generally, just to give you a ballpark, it's anywhere from 30 to 40% of our initial effort that we spend on the initial certification, right? So, so obviously the number of days spent with your team is going to be much less. And we essentially start off based on the surveillance audit requirements per our ISO guidelines, and we start off with our non-conformities that are identified in our earlier audit, and then like we go through your internal audit reports, we look at your management reviews, and that's the process we use to go through this one. And then it's the same for year 2 and year 2 as well, right? So we go through the same process for year 2, And then the last one is, again at the end of year 3, like we need to do a complete audit, right? The recertification audit, and that will be pretty much following the same process of stage 1, stage 2, and then finalizing everything. So that's the process generally we use for our certification and the surveillance and things. So once you're certified, technically you are good for 3 years as long as you continue to do your surveillance audit and stuff. And then after the end of the 3rd year, like you will go ahead with your full audit, right? And then for some of you who are on this call, I think Gert already kind of covered on in terms of like what are the different things that he will be doing as part of the implementation. If we had to group all the different things that we would be doing certification audit on, so this is how we would group it, right? So these are the 5 key focus areas that we would be looking at. Let's start from the technical safeguard. I think Gert already went through all the different requirements and the change and the controls that he is going to be implementing and whatnot. And then we will be looking at your risk register and looking at like your internal assessments and whatnots and the internal audits, and then your policies and procedure. That's like a majority of our audit time. That's where our majority of our audit time is spent. So we'll be looking at your policies, procedures, and picking some samples, and then requesting you to walk through that these controls are implemented according to your policies and procedures, and of course your supplier contracts and your customer contracts and stuff, making sure that all the requirements from the security perspectives are all being met and things. And then of course training is a big part of ISO as well. So we will be looking at the training content, the training materials and whatnot, to make sure that your organization is complying with all the requirements and whatnot. Again, like we have a different slide in terms of what are the different areas, high level we will be looking at and things. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. You always have this slide for your reference if you want to look at it. And these are like the main controls that are clauses, I think they call it. So these are the main classes that are, that we will be looking at. The main thing that actually you all need to be knowing also, from your implementation and certification perspective, ISO requires your leadership to be involved in the security management program. And so what essentially it means, security is being discussed in your board meetings, and security, you have designated security roles and responsibilities defined, and you have designated security officer, and you have some ongoing meetings with respect to the threats, with respect to the risks that you've identified, with respect to how you are remediating those risks and stuff. Those are like some of the things that ISO requires you to implement as part of the ISO 27001. Right. So there are like some of these things we don't want to get into the details, but as I mentioned earlier, most of these things are available in the ISO 27001 and 27002 manual that you can purchase, right? And also as part of making this process much simpler, we have published ISO 27001 guide that answers a lot of or at least most frequently asked questions. So this is a hyperlink. Actually, if you have the PDF, you can download and click on it. It will directly take you to the resources page on our website, where you will be able to refer to all our frequently asked questions and whatnots. Just to give you an example in terms of Gert walked us through the implementation process, and I just wanted to quickly walk you through how a certification or like an audit of a particular control would happen, right? So the data leakage prevention, which is actually very specifically called out in the new 2022 one. So what we would be doing is essentially we will be translating what is the technology that needs to be implemented. These all again needs to be mapped with your scope, right? What are the systems you're talking about, whether you're talking about email systems that are going to be in scope, whether you're talking about cloud-based systems, or whether you're talking about other FTP servers and whatnot. So we are going to be looking at all the all the systems that are going to be in scope for this particular control, and see what is your first policies and procedures, right? As part of your data leakage prevention. And if your policy says that you are going to be having this DLP implemented across the board, then we are going to be making sure that these things are implemented across the board. And then like also talk about some of this the training requirements and things for your staff to be able to understand what exactly is involved in terms of maintaining and monitoring some of those controls and stuff. From a certification perspective, we are going to be primarily looking at whether these meets the control definition and the requirements per the manual. And if it is going to be meeting the requirements, then we are going to be passing that particular control, right? If the risk, if the control is not implemented properly, and if it is not like if it requires additional enhancements and stuff, then we are going to be calling that on out as non-conformity. And then we are going to be identifying the risk that is involved in not having this control properly implemented, calling out specifically what could be the repercussions and whatnot. And that's the way like we will go about identifying, going over the control, certifying that particular control is in place, and then also be able to quantify some of the risks and other things that are going to be introduced as part of not having that particular control in place. Yeah, so these are some of the examples of policies and procedures that we would see. It doesn't need to be called specifically bring your own device policy. It could be part of your information security policy. That could be a section where you talk about this policy. What do you do with the some companies might say, hey, we don't allow BYOD totally, right? Some companies might say, okay, so we allow that upon approval by our IT team. Some companies might say, okay, so we allow BYOD, and then they need to implement certain software and things on their device, then we allow BYOD, right? Those are like some of the things we will be looking at. These are like some of the different areas that we would be looking at, like whether you have done your BIA, business impact analysis, identified all the key components for your business continuity and whatnot. So these are like some of the policies. I don't think like we will have enough time to go over each one of these things, but these are like some of the examples. Again, this is not like this doesn't include like everything that we'll be looking at, but some of the key things that we'll be looking at. And yeah, so at the end of the day, once our assessment is done, like we will be providing you with detailed observations, the findings, and remediation reports and whatnots if required, any non-conformities and stuff. And then along with that, it will also include the SOA and the profiling that we have done. And if you have gone through the whole process, and if our certification committee decides that like you're good to go, then like we will be issuing you the digital certificate. And then like also all of these things, like we we basically use our own portal, the one that I was earlier discussing, DIY platform, right? So we pretty much use our own platform to do the assessments and things. During this process, like you will obviously have access to the same information that we are using to do the determination of your control effectiveness and stuff. So you will definitely be able to access and upload the required documents and whatnot. And then in terms of the certification, actually, sorry, I'm covering more on the certification side of things. And for implementation, it is a whole different engagement model. Maybe once this is done, Gert, if you want, you can talk about the implementation model that you guys would use. Essentially, we have to work with your point of contact security officer, and we need to be knowing your point of contacts for all the different areas that we will be doing assessment on, and also the management team who is going to be looking at our final audit report and signing off and things. So generally, like, it's about like 4 to 8 hours of time. This is more on the implementation side of thing, but for certification, based on what I mentioned, like stage 1 and stage 2, we will be engaging your team.